We're here at the Bayside Live TV production offices with an incredibly talented writer who's also a wonderful activist and humanitarian, and seems to be a all-around general wonderful person. So Crystal Wolfe, I want you to meet her. Crystal, it's a pleasure meeting you and hearing all of these things that you're doing is very impressive. You're a writer, but the things that you're doing for the homeless and the passion you have for that. Let's start off with your writing. Tell us, you've written a couple books. We've got them here.
Yes.
Where the Shadows Meet the Light, The Resurrected Dream. This is a poetry book. And this are Invisible Neighbors. So tell us about this book first.
Okay, so Our Invisible Neighbors is a nonfiction comprehensive book on homelessness divided into 3 sections. The first part is personal accounts of homelessness. I interview people that are homeless on the subways, parks, people that are local that have been homeless, as well as people that have been homeless throughout the nation. And then the 12th chapter, the part 1 ends with the 12th chapter, which is 107 synopsises of celebrities who have been homeless.
Celebrities who've been homeless.
Yes. I actually found hundreds of celebrities that have been homeless, big names. So it was really eye-opening, and people told me that was very inspirational to them because it helped them to understand that it can happen to anybody. And the homeless are just like you and me. They have goals, they have dreams, they have talents, they have a purpose, and that person that you see on the street may be one of the most intelligent, talented people you'll ever know, and our hope is that we can help them get back on their feet. So then in part 2 of the book, I discuss causes of homelessness and a lot of misperceptions that I have found when I speak at community meetings. As an activist, especially in Queens, there's a lot of misunderstanding about what homelessness is and what it isn't. There's a lot of fears that aren't really based on the truth. Like a lot of people are concerned that homeless are all criminals, but actually if you're a homeless person, you're more likely to be the victim of a violent crime than you are to commit a violent crime. When homeless do commit crimes, it's typically ones of petty theft just to survive. 70% of the homeless in New York City are families. And unfortunately,
70% are families. Families. Oh,
70%.
Oh,
yeah.
So you miss 3 rent payments or 3 mortgage payments,
Exactly.
and that's how close everybody is to being homeless. There could be changes in the economy that we have no control over. It could be a tariff on China, and next thing you know, your business is suffering, and then suddenly you're going into debt and farther into debt, and you were doing fine, but you're at that threshold that's suddenly a little bit below, and you're 2 steps away from homeless, and then you're homeless.
Yes.
And families, 70%,
Yes, 70%.
that's frightening in this country.
And 40% are children. Children are the largest demographic. There are different types of homelessness, like veteran homelessness. But back to the children, the newest, most recent statistic for the children in the New York City schools is that 10% are homeless, which I think is unacceptable. It should be unacceptable to all of us that 10% of the children in schools are homeless. That is shocking to me.
There's a wonderful woman, Peggy Sheridan, who I'm sure will be seeing this. She's one of the members of our Bayside Queens Facebook and social media groups, and we've done some stories on Bayside Live TV that have included Peggy. Peggy kind of helps take care of a group of homeless people that congregate around the Dunkin' Donuts over on Northern Boulevard. And I've gone over there numerous times and met them all. And there's one woman. She's very young. She's a college student. She goes to Queensborough Community College, and she's living out of her car while she's putting herself and trying to put herself through college. Homeless, female, living in her car, going to Queensborough Community College. And she's over there, and Peggy's been helping her. But when I heard her story, it's like, wait, that's almost like unreal. How can this person, even as a college student, you just wouldn't think college students being homeless and living out of their cars going to college, but you had to love her for the fact that she kept her drive and her ambition, and she's going to school and putting her through school, but she doesn't have enough money to live anywhere. But so these statistics are frightening.
They really are. But the hope lies in the solutions. So in the third part of the book, I really delve into solutions that I come up with myself, proven solutions like Housing First, which ended chronic homelessness in Utah and has virtually ended homelessness in Canada and Finland. Because another thing that people don't realize is that homelessness is a global epidemic. It's not just New York City, it's not just America. Europe is having horrible homeless problems, South America, every country, every continent is experiencing more homeless than we've ever seen, because there's a huge disparity of wealth. It's disproportionate. There's 3%, mostly 3% of New York City, people in New York City have the wealth, and then the rest of us are just struggling to make ends meet.
Yeah, we hear globally it's the 1%. We always hear about the 1%
Well,
have 70% of the wealth.
Yeah. Or, depending on which source that you're looking at. Because I researched, hundreds of sources to write this book. And the statistics vary. Like one statistic might say there's 2.8 million homeless children in America every year. Another might say 2.5. But we have never seen so many homeless children. And domestic violence is a leading factor of the families that are homeless. And so a lot of the legislation that I'm coming with and presenting to the several politicians that I'm working with is domestic violence laws, especially in New York. We really need to shift our thinking as a society. Like one of the solutions that I am very into championing and developing is that when the NYPD come to a domestic violence call in a home, that services are offered to the people that are the victims, not just the perpetrator. Because right now, the criminal, the perpetrator, the addict, it's disproportionate amount of services offered to the person with the problem. And that's creating generations of cycles of abuse and poverty. Whereas if children in a domestic violence home were offered services, they're more likely to healthfully heal and process and grow up to not repeat the pattern. Because the leading cause of repeating domestic violence or homelessness is that you experienced it as a child.
So you learn from it and then you repeat it.
Yeah, exactly. So all these 10% of children that are in the New York City schools and homeless are that much more likely, twice as likely, 3 times more likely to become homeless as an adult and experience domestic violence as an adult, because they're not healing. And one of the chapters in my book is an elderly lady that I helped to get back on her feet, and the community helped because we did an online fundraiser for her, and we raised almost $5,000 in a month. And we were able to help her get back on her feet. And she had been abused by her father and mother, and the dad called her stupid. And in her 60s, she was still struggling with her self-worth and self-esteem, and thinking that she could actually learn. And she was perfectly fine. She was perfectly smart, wonderful person, but that training and that brainwashing she experienced as a child, she was still struggling with because she didn't know how. It's not like she wanted to still feel stupid. She didn't know how to process it. And so many millions of people are suffering their entire lives because they are never able to process what happened to them as a child. But to help the next generation, we need to offer more services to the victims and the survivors, not just the perpetrators. And I'm very passionate to get that message out and change and shift societal thinking to think about helping the person that the addict is hurting. Because an addict in a home, it's not just his problem. His actions are affecting the people around him, and they're not getting the help they need.
It's kind of like an operating system in a computer. Once you've started and you've embedded that operating system into the computer, it just keeps working with those formulas. Mm-hmm. And to wipe those formulas clean and start a new operating system for a human being, that's kind of a tough challenge to do. But you're up for the challenge. You're tackling this, huh?
Yes, I am. And my nonprofit, my nonprofit really is the solution to hunger, or a solution, and it will help to reduce it. So it's called Catering for the Homeless Incorporated. The website is www.cateringforthehomeless.com. And so what my organization is doing, the main mission is to utilize food excess for the homeless and poor from catering companies, grocery stores, restaurants, and schools.
You said just something about the Javits Center.
Yes, the Javis Center is my largest catering company on board, and one food pickup from them, on average, the minimum is 200 up to 1,600 meals one food pickup provides. And this is quality food, untouched food, prepackaged food, yogurt, sandwiches, salads, wraps, things like that. So then I work with some other smaller restaurants and catering companies that don't provide as large a quantity. And then I'm really tackling the Department of Education right now because in September of 2017, Senator Joseph Adabo and Governor Cuomo passed into legislation a food law, which all of this is on my website, and this would encourage schools to donate their food excess to the charities who could distribute it and recycle and compost what they couldn't give, like food that had been touched.
Taking it all the way to the farther end, to even composting what doesn't get used.
Exactly, because I not to name names, but I contacted one university who said they believed they were the only school that recycled or composted. But I know at least most of them don't. I can't say for sure how many, but there's thousands of schools in New York City and in New York State that have tons of food waste on a regular basis, and just that could end hunger. So in the last 2 years, I've contacted about 100 schools, only to learn in the last couple months that most of the schools aren't going to comply with the law until the process is issued from the Department of Education. So I have a petition that I really encourage people to sign. It's on change.org, and it's a petition to the Department of Education by Catering for the Homeless Incorporated. And that is for the Department of Education to allow the schools to give the food. Because I talk to teachers and they tell me the kids are coming to school hungry, there's definitely tons of food waste, and they really want to give it. But the Department of Education not only makes them throw the food away, some of the schools, they even bleach it so nobody can get the food. So it's horrible, yeah.
Listen, we're going to come back with Crystal in a few minutes, and you're going to see a kind of part 2 of this. And I'm going to explain to everyone. A lot of you who know me are going to know this story that I'm going to tell as soon as we come back. But you're a woman after my own heart. I've done some things for the homeless, mostly out in the film industry. We're going to come back in a minute. I'm going to talk to Crystal about that and share some notes.
Okay.
So. Yeah. So we're back with Crystal, as promised, and talking about this wonderful thing that she's doing, taking on homelessness. Mm-hmm. And now we just started approaching the food for the homeless. And what I mentioned before we left was that you're a woman after my own heart. I'm out in L.A. I'm running my film studios. And on the first property, it was called the Queen of Angels Hospital. I turned it into the Queen of Angels Studios. On that property, it had a shelter for homeless and battered women. And while I'm there, watching the caterers for all the movies that we're doing, we had huge, $200 million feature films being shot through my studios all the time. And then the caterers would come and they'd feed everybody. But then afterwards, they'd throw all this food away. And I'd be like, oh, my God, what are you doing? You're throwing all that food away. I've got a shelter for homeless and battered women right here. Mm-hmm. So I would just take the food over. So first, it was great. And then we ran into the one guy who was a bit of an idiot. He said, oh, no, you can't do that. They eat any of our food. You can't give it to the homeless because if they get sick, they're going to sue you. And we can't have them sue. So you can't do that with our food. And I was like, are you kidding me? I mean, do you have no imagination? You're a film producer. You're a film producer. You can get all kinds of other things done, but you can't figure that out. Yeah. I said, this is how easy it was. So what I did was I wrote on a simple piece of yellow pad paper at the top, I take responsibility for what I put into my own mouth and hold anyone harmless should I get sick from eating this food. Mm-hmm. Sign here, you eat. Mm-hmm. So I started that. And I went back to the guy and said, look, you're covered. No problem. They signed this, you're indemnified. But then we went even further and got the shelter itself. We had the shelter indemnified and had all of the shelter residents sign a thing saying we indemnify the shelter for any of the food that they might accept on our behalf. If we eat it, we don't get sick. Then we went even farther and made another indemnification for the caterers so that the caterers, their food couldn't be. So we started a whole series of indemnifications and started this food program. And I was doing first 15 20 meals a day to the one shelter, and then I took over a second facility that I actually ran with Donald Trump. It was the Ambassador Hotel. It was back, I won't tell the date, it was a long time ago. And we took it over and we turned it into, I was doing the movie Marrying Man with Kim Basinger and Alec Baldwin. And it was at the Ambassador Hotel, and I turned the Ambassador Hotel into the Ambassador Studios for Donald Trump. I did one more up in Burbank, which was called Front Street Studios. But in each case, where all the productions, as soon as they landed, for one of the first things, I had them all sign, told them, this is our program. We have this food for the program, food for the homeless program. We're going to take your food. We're going to do great things with it. And with the caterers, what we actually also did is we did get those letters of tax-deductible donations. So we were actually giving them back a tax-deductible donation things, and it worked out great. We did over 32,000 meals after the first year. I mean, we had food going everywhere, and everybody loved it. And all it took was just a simple caring, and people would see me. I was so enthusiastic about getting food, and I was like, oh my God, we have more food. And they're like, Greg, you got Johnny Depp on the set, you got Sharon Stone on the set, you got all, and you're so happy about doing stuff for this homeless. But that's the kind of people that we are. So I started a food program myself with the film industry, and it worked out really well. So I love that you're doing that here. But I never went to go to the extent that you did. Tell us about going to the local politicians and what that was like and how you got them on your side.
Okay, well, I began this journey through, in my area where I live in Maspeth. There was some homeless protests going on for the homeless coming into the Holiday Inn Express. So I had vowed, if I was ever in a community that was protesting the homeless, I would speak at their community board as a voice and an advocate for the homeless, to say that, you know what, I'm in the community and I care about the homeless, I want to help the homeless, and I want them here. So I went to my community board, and that's where I really, I fell in love with the community board. They became my family, my biggest supporters, and I love all the community boards because I found out that they were really like the activists of every district. So I love the community boards. But
all the good deed doers and people who care about their communities wind up going to the community board meetings. I started covering them here and said, look at these people. These are my kind of, these are people who are down and doing something for their community. So community boards are great.
Yes, and the secretary of the community board 5 is the one that gave me the idea for the online fundraiser for my friends. So I always give credit to them. So then I also found out that most of the people that protest these homeless shelters aren't against the homeless themselves. They're against the temporary solutions, and they want permanent solutions. So there, at these community boards, there's a lot of politicians that come, and it's grown and expanded. I've talked to them at the community boards. Now I'm partnering with, I've got about 15 politicians on board now for my next
15?
Toiletry drive.
That's impressive.
Yeah,
15. I'm happy if I can get 1 or 2. You got 15.
Yeah. I also do toiletry drives for the homeless. So the politicians give their office as donation drop-offs. So my next one that's coming up is going to be through early October to early November, and we've provided about 13,500 toiletries so far. And then I also work with, I'm also a member of different civic associations, and I've been a reporter, so they also know me on that level. And then in the book, I interview Assemblyman Andrew Hevesy and Assemblyman Brian Barnwell on their solutions for homelessness and its leading causes like affordable housing and landlord accountability and these things like that. So Andrew Hevesy has a bill called Home Stability Support. It was passed by the Assembly and the Senate in last 2 years, but Governor Cuomo did not write it into legislation. So that is a big problem.
Is that a bad thing? Cuomo bad? Not good? He didn't do that well?
I try very hard to be diplomatic because I believe that every person has good and bad. Every politician does good and bad. And, so I don't want to attack anybody, but I've been disappointed with the solutions that are being presented that are permanent solutions to homelessness, and preventative solutions aren't getting passed, and they desperately need to be passed because every year there's more homeless in New York City. Because in 2014, the Advantage program was cut, and that created an additional 12,000 homeless every year, according to Coalition for the Homeless. So it's a huge epidemic in New York City. New York City is the city with the most homeless. It's also a problem.
More than Los Angeles, huh?
More. Yes, there's more in New York City than Los Angeles. But as I was saying earlier, privately. But sorry, I got distracted. But sorry, cut that if you can. So Los Angeles have more of the homeless on the streets. Los Angeles does not offer as many shelters. New York City is a sanctuary city. New York City is really the only major city other than Washington, D.C. that has right to shelter in under 32 degrees. So there's less homeless in Los Angeles, but they're more seen. And it's similar in New York City where people get the mindset that the homeless are all mentally ill or addicts. So about 20% of the homeless population has addiction problems or mental illness. But usually those are the homeless that are seen, whereas the unseen homeless are the veterans and the families that are behind closed doors and in the homeless shelters. So that's why people get a misperception. I also see a lot of elderly homeless on the streets. And people also have a misperception that it's easy to get into homeless shelters or that people come from other parts of the country to get that right to shelter in New York City. But the reality is, to get into a shelter, it's an intensive process. You have to have shots, you have to have paperwork, and you have to have proof of New York City residency for 6 months to a year. So you can't just come here and be like, hey, I'm homeless, I want to be in the homeless shelter. So that's one of the misperceptions. So
we had a couple here in Bayside, and they had an encampment down by Fort Totten. And we have a big social media following and a great conversation there. A lot of people talking about a lot of things. And this topic came up a number of times. And some people objected to their camp down there and said it was taking, it's ruining the neighborhood. Our neighborhood's destroyed. Property values are going to go down. And then some were not kind. But then other people were very compassionate and said, "Wow, my God, I went down there to speak to them, a fellow Sean and Janet. And they were lovely. They were fine.
Yeah.
Sean has a little bit of a paranoia problem about authority. Janet was the sweetest thing ever. And I said, these people are not endangering anybody.
Yeah.
And then that winter came, and that first big winter chill was coming down from the north, and we were looking at the temperature was going to drop first time below 32. Wow. And we got on, and wonderful people in our Bayside Queens Facebook group, we all banded together, and we started a GoFundMe, and we raised enough money to get them out of there. We were able to get Janet into a safe house for women, and that was actually, it was Senator Avella at the time, and we got her into a safe shelter. Sean, we got him into a motel temporarily, and then he was moved to the Booth Memorial Hospital had a facility for him for a short time over the winter. And that's when I learned all about Code Blue. Right. So they have this thing, and what you were talking about before, they have this thing called Code Blue. And when there's a group called Breaking Ground, and they go and they will pick up, they help run these shelters, and they will go pick up homeless people. They know where everybody is. They know this person's there, this person's there. It's almost like they know where every homeless person is around New York, and they will go pick them up when the temperature is going to go below freezing and take them to a shelter. And with Janet, we have phone numbers that she calls. I've donated one of these little phones to Janet. It's a wristband, watch thing, and a little gizmo.
Yeah.
So she got her gizmo, and she can call up, and they will come and pick her up and drive her to the shelters. So I've learned a lot about these programs myself, and one of the things that you touched on, which I love that you do this too, we do know that you're supposed to have a permanent residence if you're going to get food stamps and food help, or SNAP. What's it called? SNAP is supplementary nutritional something program.
Yeah.
So
SNAP. I can't remember what it stands for.
But you are supposed to have a residence someplace to get them. But they do give some to homeless people. But you can't buy toiletries with that. So you can get some food, but you can't get some necessary toothbrush or toothpaste or toilet paper or anything. So you're helping supply that too. So you're comprehensive. You're thinking of everything for everybody.
Everything. Yes, and as far as the solutions, I have so many solutions in my book, and also that I'm working with the politicians for legislation, and that's on the Congress, Assembly, Senate, and City Council level.
And that legislation would do what?
I have 20 different bills I'm working with. So that's one of the.
Well, you're talking to
reasons-
15 politicians. You might as well have had 20 bills to go through.
No, but I learned from my council member that each politician is only allowed 10 legislations to present in January. So that's why I have to work with multiple ones, because they can only and some I have like 20 different bills, and some of them are on the city council level and some of them are on different levels. So like mainly I have like Assembly and Senate, but each one is taking like 3 to 5, you know what I mean? But then we have to do tons of research to develop them, because when they present these bills, the more research readily available, the more it's going to convince people to vote on it. You know?
Okay. Crystal, you're doing so much.
Yes.
You're publishing.
Yeah.
You're working with politicians, creating legislations. You're going to the Javits Center, and to all these places to find where you can get food. How are you doing this and supporting yourself if you're doing that much work for the homeless? I'm nobody's more aware than I am of when you're donating and volunteering and doing good deed, doing like you're doing, that's taking up enormous amount of your time. And how are you funding yourself in these efforts?
Well, to be honest, I'm struggling to make ends meet every single month. And
Every volunteer is. It's the nature of the beast.
Yes, if you do want to donate, you can donate straight through my website, but I'm struggling myself. I mean, I'm hand to fist myself, and every month I'm like, I got through another month. I do have some income through my books, but it's not enough to sustain me. I have part-time jobs,
Well, we're going to be getting a lot of people buying these books because they're great. The poetry book,
Yes.
the Resurrected Dream, the Where the Shadows Meet the Light, where it's like where the water, where the ocean meets the sand, where the shadows meet the light.
I like that.
And tell us about this book.
Yes, well, this book actually.
Because we're going to help get her funded, because you're going to get to read wonderful literature from a very talented writer. So tell us about this book.
This book actually.
Wait.
So,
I have a better idea.
okay.
We're going to come back for our 3rd episode. So stay where you are. We're going to come back and we're going to hear all about her writing and her books in our next episode. So we'll be back again for Bayside Live TV with Crystal Wolfe. And I'm loving this interview with you. We'll be back in a little bit. Stay tuned.